All right, let's put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. John Rothstein here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page on my new podcast that has been going now for a couple of months. Want to remind you to hit that subscribe button to continue to get all the best college basketball coverage that there is on the planet. Also want to remind you that later in this show, we will be joined by Minnesota head coach Niko Medved. We are bringing you all the college basketball content 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And again, if you are not able to watch this podcast live or can't get access to us visually, we want to remind you that all the logistical things are getting sorted out in short order. So we will be available on Apple, on Spotify moving forward, so you can get us audio-wise. That is all coming in the near future, along with an official title for this venture, which again is bringing you everything you want to know about the college basketball world 52 weeks out of the calendar year. This is June, and we are officially now 20 weeks away from the first day of the 25-26 college basketball season, and there's still plenty of things to discuss. And that leads us to three big things. And I am going to start right now with the bullet point of the dissection of Duke's non-conference schedule for the 25-26 season. Now, many times in the past, whenever Duke has been the focal point of a non-conference scheduling topic, the discussion has been the limited amount of games that Duke would play away from Cameron Indoor Stadium in November and December. That is not the case with the Blue Devils for the upcoming season. And if you really take a look at what Duke has in store during the non-conference portion of the schedule, it's a plethora of marquee games, and only one of those tilts will take place in Durham at Cameron Indoor Stadium. The second day of the season, Duke is going to play Texas in Charlotte in a non-conference game in what will be Sean Miller's first game as Texas's head coach. Duke then in mid-November is going to play the start of a home-and-home series with Army. Obviously, there's a connection there with Mike Krzyzewski, Coach K, and Duke. That's another Duke game that's going to be away from Cameron Indoor Stadium. That's followed up by a game against Kansas in the Champions Classic in Madison Square Garden. Then there's the game on CBS in primetime on Thanksgiving in Chicago. Meanwhile, announced last week, Duke's going to play Florida at home in the ACC-SEC Challenge. Duke is going to then in December. The date is not official yet, but from everything I'm gathering, it's going to be December the 6th. Duke is going to play Michigan State in East Lansing. That's a return game from a home-and-home, the situation that Duke had when the Champions Classic was played on campuses during COVID. Duke's going to play Texas Tech at Madison Square Garden on December 20th, and then Duke is also going to play Michigan in February in Washington, D.C., much like the Blue Devils played Illinois last year at Madison Square Garden. So you look right there at the totality of Duke's non-conference schedule in 25-26. There's 8 games that are non-ACC related. Obviously, the Army game is not against a power conference opponent, but it's still the first time Duke will be in a true road setting next season. You are looking, though, at this makeup of Duke's schedule, and you start thinking about a lot of things. First of all, you have to thank John Shire for continuing to pursue major non-conference opportunities. You also have to look at this. Duke may have felt, especially in the Final Four against Houston, like the lack of competition in the ACC last year let the Blue Devils down in crunch time. I think that is a real storyline into how Duke put together the non-conference schedule. Now, you look, obviously, at the teams they're playing. Texas, Kansas, Arkansas, Florida, Michigan State, Texas, Michigan. I rank 45 teams in the Rothstein 45. All 7 of those teams are in the top 45. And in fact, all 7 of those teams are in the top 35. In fact, the lowest ranked team out of those 7 teams, with the exception of Army, is the Kansas Jayhawks. So Duke is going to be tested significantly before it gets to the guts of ACC play in January of next season. Duke is going to play 2 games at Madison Square Garden, a game at Michigan State, a game against Arkansas on CBS in Chicago, and a game down the road in Charlotte against Texas. So we are going to know a great deal about Duke before the calendar shifts to 2026. Duke should enter next season as a top 10 team. There's no Cooper Flagg. There's no Conca Nipple. But Duke brings back 2 proud veterans in Caleb Foster and Isaiah Evans. and also brings in Cameron Boozer, one part of the Boozer twins, who should be coming in an all-ACC preseason first-team player, in my opinion, entering next season. So there's always intrigue surrounding Duke, regardless of where Duke is playing. But Duke is playing, again, several marquee games next season, and only one of those games, Florida in the ACC-SEC Challenge, will be played at Cameron Indoor Stadium. So the majority of games that the Blue Devils will play against non-conference opponents will be away from Durham, North Carolina. We switch now to another topic, and it's a topic that is really a deep dive for June the 16th. But as I always start looking ahead to the next season, I start thinking about early season awards, early season lists. It's what you do if you cover college basketball 365 days a year, as I do. And I start thinking about preseason All American teams. And I think the first thing you should do, and I'm a big believer of this, is you have to look at the returning players in college basketball who earned any sort of All-American honors the season previously, because there is obviously the precedent set that a player can perform at an All-American caliber level, and there's demonstrated returning ability. There are 6 players right now who are returning to college basketball that earned All-American caliber honors last season. Trey Kaufman-Renn and Braden Smith from Purdue. Donovan Dent, who is now at UCLA. He was at New Mexico last season. PJ Haggerty, who is at Kansas State and was at Memphis last season. JT Toppin at Texas Tech, the reigning Big 12 Player of the Year, and also Bennett Sturts, who transferred from Drake to Iowa to play for his head coach, Ben McCullum. Those are the 6 returning players. So that means if you're going to do 3 preseason All-American teams and maybe 5 honorable mentions, there's 9 spots available on one of those 3 teams. And I think now, if you're looking at some of the other great players, in addition to those 6 that are returning to college, there's a number of guys that come to the forefront. You could talk about Richie Saunders at BYU. Tahad Pettiford is a great name at Auburn. You could also look at Darian Williams, who transferred from Texas Tech to NC State and is going to be a major focal point in year 1 under Will Wade. LeBaron Philon's another great name. Obviously, Milos Uzan at Houston. I am always somebody who, when it comes to preseason All-American lists, and look, I haven't gotten and dissected things with a fine-tooth comb just yet, but I am always somebody who is going to give the benefit of the doubt to the player that is produced at a high level in college basketball versus somebody like a Darren Peterson at Kansas or an AJ Debance at BYU. That's the way I cover the beat. So I think if there's 9 other spots for those potential preseason All-Americans, there are 2 players from St. John's that deserve to be under consideration. One is obvious. It's Zuby Ejiofor. It's somebody who was a player last year who was a major part of the renaissance under St. John's, and in my opinion, somebody who I will have and I will vote as the Big East preseason player of the year for next season. But the other player on St. John's roster that could be in the All-American conversation entering next season as a preseason All-American is Bryce Hopkins, the transfer from Providence. Now, Bryce Hopkins has missed significant time over the last 2 seasons, but breaking things down with a fine-tooth comb, the production that he showed at Providence cannot be debated. 3 games last year, 17 points, 7.7 rebounds. And in 50 total games at Providence, he was 16 points per game and 8.8 rebounds. This is the addition of a 16-9 guy if he's healthy, and he's going to be playing next season for Rick Pitino. And if Bryce Hopkins can play at the same level for St. John's as he showed during those 50 games when he was on the floor for Providence, St. John's will be firmly in the discussion to have the best power forward center combination in the country next year with Hopkins and Zuby Ejiofor, 2 players who will firmly be in the mix for preseason All-American honors. Now, there's a lot to get through in terms of lasting throughout the course of a season. I get that. I understand that. But this is somebody who, again, played 1 season at Providence under Ed Cooley And Ed Cooley, I remember this a couple years ago, had a conversation with Sean Miller when Sean Miller was at Xavier at the time. The two were great friends. They worked together years ago with USA Basketball. And he told Sean Miller that Bryce Hopkins, this is before Ed Cooley left for Georgetown, Bryce Hopkins has a chance to be the best player I've ever coached at Providence. It's unfortunate because Kim English's team was headed towards a very good seed in the NCAA tournament 2 years ago, that Bryce Hopkins went down with an ACL injury. It's unfortunate last year that Bryce Hopkins, after averaging 17 points and 7.7 rebounds, was not able to sustain playing the entire season. But now you get him with Rick Pitino. Now you get him with St. John's, who has unequivocally, in my opinion, the most talented roster in college basketball entering next season. That doesn't mean that St. John's has the best team, but it has unequivocally the most talented roster in college basketball. And now you have a Bryce Hopkins that, again, should at least be in the conversation of being a preseason All American to start the 25-26 season. So St. John's, in my opinion, will have two players, Hopkins and Zuby Ejiofor, firmly in the mix to be preseason All Americans. And both, in my opinion, unequivocally, should be all Big East first-team players to start the 25-26 season. Bryce Hopkins, if healthy, is a known commodity as a transfer. The transfer, perhaps, that is the biggest unknown commodity that will have the biggest impact on his team next season is Xavier Booker at UCLA, who played 2 years at Michigan State, but did not have major production for the Spartans. The 6'11 big man, the lefty, is a former McDonald's All-American. And this is somebody that will firmly control UCLA's ceiling during the upcoming season. Now, doing a deep dive on Xavier Booker, there's certain things we have to understand when we're forecasting his potential impact for the Bruins, who I want to make clear is a team that I have in the top 10, is a team that returns 55% of its scoring from last season's team that went to the NCAA tournament, won 23 games, and lost in the second round to Tennessee. UCLA needs Xavier Booker to be a factor to have a chance to compete for a Big Ten regular season title and earn a high seed in the NCAA tournament. That is just a fact of life. But when you do the deep dive, this is what you come up with. Xavier Booker, one time in 2 years at Michigan State, played over 20 minutes in a college basketball game. It was in the Maui Invitational last November against North Carolina. He had 12 and 7. Xavier Booker played 17 minutes or more at Michigan State last season 9 times. His averages, 8.3 points, 3.8 rebounds, 1 block per game. And in talking to the UCLA staff, the biggest thing that they showed to me when I talked to them about Xavier Booker transition to UCLA was the switch in his position. He played straight power forward for Tom Izzo and East Lansing. He will be now the 5-man playing in more space for Mick Cronin in UCLA. Now, we are planning a family trip to Southern California in late July. And of course, one of the first things I did was reach out to the UCLA staff to find out when workouts were going to be, because I need to do my due diligence to see how Xavier Booker is progressing for UCLA at center, because this is going to control the entire ceiling in Westwood next season. Now, if Xavier Booker isn't a factor for UCLA, does UCLA have a chance to be a good team next season? Absolutely. Donovan Dent is going to be a preseason first-team All-American, the transfer from New Mexico. UCLA had below-average guard play last season. Sky Clark is a proud veteran. He'll be one of the better glue guys in college basketball next season, in my opinion. Eric Daly is a burgeoning star. Tyler Bilodeau is an all-Big Ten caliber player. Those 4 players give you known commodities 1 through 4. I also expect a big jump out of Trent Perry as a sophomore, who's a former McDonald's All-American, like Xavier Booker. And there's other players in practice that I anticipate I will see who are role players that the Bruins will use off the bench. Brandon Williams and Eric Freeney, 2 guys who redshirted, and also Jamar Brown, a transfer from UAKC. But if Xavier Booker can be a 10-6-2 guy for UCLA next season and give them a presence defensively on the glass, something they didn't have last season, UCLA is going to be in business. in a major, major way. Again, 23 wins last season with below average point guard play. And now you add a wild card at center in Xavier Booker, who, again, will be playing a much different position. This reminds me, it's not the exact same thing, but it reminds me of when Samson Johnson went to UConn, and then after a couple of years, Dan Hurley switched his position from power forward to center, and all of a sudden he became a really productive player. Booker last year, again, in 9 games where he played 17 minutes or more, was 8-4-1. If UCLA can get 10-6 and 2 blocks or 11-7 and 2 blocks, UCLA is going to be a team that's going to be a really high seed in the 2025 NCAA tournament. Because watching this team last year, there was nobody to do what Donovan Dent can do. There was nobody to set the table. And let's face it, UCLA did not adequately replace Tiger Campbell from that great run of Bruins that Mick Cronin saw take to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament 3 straight times, including a Final Four berth in 2021, until it added Donovan Dent this spring. But this is a player now at center in Xavier Booker that will change the ceiling for the Bruins if he is a real factor. If he can run rim to rim, if he can block shots, if he can catch lobs from Dent. Again, 10-6-2, 11-7-2, UCLA will be a major factor atop the Big Ten, which means UCLA will be a high seed in the 2026 NCAA tournament. But this is only June. I want to hear from you, your thoughts on Duke's non-conference schedule, your thoughts on Bryce Hopkins as a preseason All American, plus Xavier Booker, and everything else that's on your mind. We'll get to the chat when we return. John Rothstein hanging out here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page.
The crowd loves champions. Gladiator 2 is an epic spectacle.
Remarkable!
To amuse you is my only wish.
The glory is yours, not mine.
Very good. Gladiator 2, rated R. Now streaming on Paramount+.
All right, welcome back. Let's get now to the chat. We're asking for all of your questions. We are going to go to Nathan Campbell. John, what do you see in store for Ohio State? I think if you're looking at Ohio State right now, Nathan, you're looking at a team that should be somewhere in the middle of the Big Ten. Love the returning guards, with obviously Bruce Thornton being an all Big Ten caliber player, as well as John Mobley, and love what I see from Devin Royal. I'm concerned about the front court for Ohio State. To me, that is the big question right now for the Buckeyes entering next season. Uptown Dre wants to know, John, could my Hoyas make some noise in the Big East? Solid schedule and players this season. This is what I'll tell you about Georgetown entering next season. Ed Cooley has put together an interesting roster from the sense where he's taken a lot of guys who were like 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", and brought them in who can all really defend, but we just don't know what we're going to see from the Hoyas on offense. Losing Thomas Sorber was a big loss. But I'm looking at Georgetown taking Langston Love from Baylor, taking, obviously, KJ Lewis from Arizona, Deshaun Harris-Smith from Maryland, Jeremiah Williams from Rutgers. There is really good positional size at Georgetown. Malik Mack is back at point guard. But the question is Georgetown going to be good enough to be in contention for that 3-4 spot in the Big East? Because make no mistake about it, this entire league is centered around St. John's and UConn, and that is not changing. I've said it on this show, and I will repeatedly say it on this show. St. John's and UConn are each going to win a minimum of 16 Big East regular season conference games. And you look behind them, and we're going to do a Big East preview here in July when we start rolling out our conference previews, but you look behind those two superpowers in St. John's and UConn. Creighton begins its first season without Ryan Kalkbrenner, like what Greg McDermott has done in the transfer portal. 2 good players from Iowa, Josh Dixon, Owen Freeman. You bring back Jackson McAndrew. You bring back Jason Green. But let's go through Creighton with Ryan Kalkbrenner the last 4 years, as he's been a 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. Round of 32 this year, lost to Auburn. That was a couple of months ago. Then we go back a year ago. Sweet 16, lost to Tennessee. How about 2023? Lost to San Diego State in the Elite Eight. How about one more year? Lost to Kansas, the eventual national champions, in the round of 32. Not going to be easy to replace Ryan Kalkbrenner. A. Cohen 71386 wants to know, John, how much of a drop-off do you expect for Duke without Cooper Flagg? Well, a significant drop-off. I mean, this guy's going to be the number one player in the draft. This guy is going to go into a situation with the Dallas Mavericks where he's expected to play a major role right away for an NBA team. Cooper Flagg was a National Player of the Year. He was a generational talent. I would expect a significant jump for Isaiah Evans. I love Cam Boozer as a face-up big man. Loved what I saw from him in the Nike Hoop Summit, but Duke is going to have tremendous talent, but Duke, is going to lose the number one player in the draft. It's going to lose Con Knippel. It's going to lose Tyrese Proctor. I mean, there's still some proud veterans, though, back for Duke, which is what's really, really important. I just think there's a lot of different things now for the ACC that need to be sorted out. And I'll tell you, when you look last week, and I was working on this with the ACC-SEC Challenge when I was working on the matchups, and you look at the quality of teams that we saw last year in the SEC, and you start looking at the matchups with the ACC, you see how much further this conference has to go. ACC needs a big year at NC State, needs a big year out of Miami, needs a big year out of Virginia. 18 teams, the ACC would sign right now for 6 to be in the NCAA tournament. Again, we're going to get to Minnesota head coach Niko Medved here in just a minute. John Rothstein here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. Now, Davo Flats is saying, still talking about Hopkins, he hasn't been good in a long time. Look, Bryce Hopkins was somebody, again, when he was healthy, that was 16 points and 9 rebounds. If he's healthy and he's in shape and he's playing for Rick Pitino, you are looking at a player that, again, will be in the mix to be a preseason All American and will be in the mix, in my opinion, to be the Big East Player of the Year. You have to give that to Zuby Ejiofor now to start the season. Zuby Ejiofor was a guy who was a linchpin in that run last year that saw St. John's win 31 games, win a Big East regular season and tournament title, and get a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. But Hopkins is the guy, in my opinion, to watch as a Big East Player of the Year candidate next season, as long as he's healthy. St. John's, much like I mentioned with UCLA, definitely on the radar for me to go see live in person this summer before the fall begins. Now, it's a new era for St. John's with Bryce Hopkins. It's also a new era for Minnesota with Niko Medved. We check in with the new head coach of the Gophers when he returns, John Rothstein, hanging out here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Pleased to be joined by the new head coach at Minnesota. He is Niko Medved. Niko, welcome. Does this feel like a dream right now?
You know what? It's interesting. Like it is. There's been moments, but as you know, in these jobs, you just put your head down and go, right? With the recruiting and the staff and the practices and everything. It's a new place, but you're kind of doing the same thing that we all do, right, around the country. And there hadn't been a ton of time to kind of step back and realize how cool this is for me. Coming home to my alma mater, my family's here. I was able to take my dad to dinner last night on Father's Day. That's cool. I hadn't been able to do that in how long. So there have been moments. Here, but man, you're just in the mix doing the job. So it's hard sometimes to kind of step back and really appreciate it.
Now, this is a full circle moment for you, as you mentioned, coming back to your alma mater, coming back to your home state. Growing up as a kid in the state of Minnesota, what was Gopher basketball to Niko Medved?
Well, I grew up and I eventually worked for him, Clem Haskins. And, people back then, I mean, Clem really had this program rolling. And, I remember my dad taking me to games when I was a little kid here. And when Clem really came in here and turned it around, and some of those old teams that went to the Sweet 16 and then the Final 8, and the barn was packed every night. And so, my memories were it was a tough ticket to get. People loved being here. There was a ton of energy and enthusiasm around the program. And that's my memory growing up being around the program.
So for you personally, this is your 4th head coaching job in the last 12 years. So you've consistently moved up here. How do you explain your own meteoric rise in this profession?
I don't know, John. That's a great question, and I just kind of, I think we've stayed true to ourselves, and the things that the same ingredients and way that you do it works anywhere, in my opinion. Regardless of level, and so I think we've tried to stay true to ourselves. We hire great people, we recruit great young men and talented young men. I think the identity and the way that we've played and has really allowed us to be successful. But I think just staying true to ourselves and who we are, I think has really been the key. And that's the plan, John, to do the same thing here. We're not going to change. And you have to evolve, with the times and what's going on, but we're not going to change who we are and what we do. That's allowed us to be successful.
Well, and obviously your coaching acumen really came to the forefront last season. Your Colorado State team played great basketball the last couple of months of the season. You won 11 games in a row late in the year. Why was your team in such a rhythm?
I think it sounds crazy, but we obviously had, talented players. We had Nick Clifford, I think is going to get drafted in the first round here. We had good depth, but I think it's really just the character of those guys. We got off to a tough start, kind of guys finding their roles, figuring it out, how we were going to play together. But those guys just kept working, kept believing, trusting me and the other coaches. And I think it's because of that they were able to really dig in and turn it around. And once they started to build some confidence, boy, it was really fun. And yeah, down the stretch, I thought we were playing like a top 15 team in the country there that last month of the season. But I think it's a testament to those guys. And it's always been important. But in today's day and age where there's so many new faces on all these teams, at some point you're going to have some adversity. And do you have the right kind of guys who are going to, dig in and fight through that? And I really think that was the key to it last year. And then obviously we had some great players too, but Nick played terrific for us, and particularly down the stretch. And he really was a great leader. And then some other guys some of the young guys really came on the scene, Kyan Evans, Jalen Crocker Johnson, and then some of these older guys too, who really, really found their niche. And maybe they were playing a bigger role at another place, but they came off the bench for us last year and they really bought into those roles.
Now, obviously, when you win a game in the NCAA tournament, as you did against Memphis, you set yourself up for a chance to go to the second weekend, and you were inches away before you lost to Maryland on a buzzer beater by Derek Queen. I'm curious, out of all the losses you've had in your head coaching career, is that the one you think you're going to remember when you're old and gray?
It's right up there. I'm embarrassed to say, and I will, because we've started practice. I haven't watched the end of it yet.
Wow.
The game, and I will. It was a phenomenal college basketball game, and our guys had a ton of confidence going into the game, and thought we played, well enough to win. But it all happened so fast, in that moment. We hit the shot to go up, and but I've seen the shot that Derek made. But what do you do?
Yeah,
he made an unbelievable shot. He's a pro. He's going left off the wrong foot, banks it in. It's March Madness. And I think March Madness, everybody sees those moments, the team that makes the shot to go, but you realize there's another team on the other side of it that played great just to be in that situation. And we happen to be on the other side of it. But that one really, really hurt. Going to the Sweet 16 is really, really hard to do. And it would have been unbelievable for our Colorado State program.
Now, if he misses that shot, you're going to the Sweet 16 with a team that was not in the position to earn an at-large berth to the tournament, but played great down the stretch and took the automatic qualifier. But he made the shot. Then you need to recalibrate things and make a life decision shortly thereafter. What was the emotional roller coaster like, losing that game to Maryland and then having to tell Colorado State that you were leaving to go to take the Minnesota job?
It was really hard, John. It's the unfortunate thing about our business is the timing. It used to be they hired coaches at the Final Four, right?
Right.
And it's just things have changed, so much in our world and obviously in the players' world too. But those things are already kind of decided. And you're in Seattle, and 20 hours later you're on a plane and you're in Minneapolis, starting a new job. And really difficult because, I love Colorado State. I love the people. I love the players. We had so much invested there. I'll tell you what, though, just, because of your relationship with the players, they all knew, I think they all know what was going on. And what was really cool for me is, when I did have an opportunity to talk to them in person, it's just, they all understood.
Yep.
It didn't make it any easier, and there's tears and all that stuff. But how many of them, have reached out and said, Coach, we're so happy for you. They knew what this meant to me. And so it was really, really difficult, but it was really neat for me to see, most of the players' reactions to it personally. And that really meant a lot.
It's interesting. You look at obviously that roller coaster emotionally, and then you're thrusted into a new job at Minnesota. You mentioned the grace period now that coaches used to have when they took over a program. It's not like that anymore. Now that you've endured this at the non-power conference level and you're starting now at the power conference level, is it possible to still build a program, or are you just in this climate building a team every single year?
No, I 100% you can build a program, and there are programs who tend to be successful, through the last 10 to 20 years, and have found a way through this last 4 or 5 year period and have continued to be successful. I thought we were doing it at CSU. We've been to the tournament 3 of the last four years there. Is it different? Yes. Do you have to evolve with the times? Yes. But I still think the most successful programs, they have an identity. They know who they are. They know who they're going to recruit. They still find a way to retain key players. We may not retain as many guys as we did in the past, but you still have to find a way to have some continuity in your program. And that's the challenge for us, is to start to build a program, start to have some continuity. Some guys are here for multiple years and buy into what you're doing. And yes, it may look a little bit different, John, than it did 10 to 15 years ago, but absolutely you can build a program. You have to.
Niko, you look at obviously what the Mountain West has been able to do, and you and I have talked about it so much the last couple of years. It's amazing the volume that this league consistently continues to get in the NCAA tournament. But it felt like, and you've lived this as a coach, you had to be near flawless sometimes in the non-conference portion of the schedule or close to it to have a chance at an at-large berth. What is it like now entering a league like the Big Ten, where you're going to have a plethora of quad one opportunities at your disposal?
It's a different feeling when that Big Ten schedule comes out and you see your 1 plays and your 2 plays, and you start looking out. We're at Purdue, at Illinois, here. It's daunting. There's definitely, but like you said, there also, you have a good week and your whole outlook changes. You have a bad week and you're looking up at the schedule like, oh my God, are we going to win again? But you're right, at the Mountain West level, which is a phenomenal league, it's impossible. You put so much time into just trying to schedule non-conference opportunities. And then when you get them, you almost have to be flawless. You make a mistake and it doesn't work. We lived that last year. But it's a whole different feeling. But at the same point in time, I do think, your avenue to get in the NCAA tournament is much clearer at this level.
Is Minnesota a harder job now in an 18-team Big Ten with UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon?
It's a great question. I think some of that's to be determined. There's probably part of it that makes it harder, not just for us, for everybody with the quantity of teams. But at the same point in time, I do think there's more access to the tournament, than there's ever been. And you're in a situation, look at what the SEC did last year, and you're going to see these teams that have, over half of their teams are going to have an opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament. And I think the Big Ten is in a position to do that as well. So yes, it does make it daunting, but again, there's also more opportunity than there's ever been.
Minnesota has only had 6 NCAA tournament appearances since 2000. Why have the Gophers not been able to sustain success?
It's a great question, and you follow it from a distance. There's been some really good coaches that have taken a crack at it, and maybe goes back to my point before. Can Minnesota find an identity of who we are, how we play, how we recruit? Develop a consistency and maybe putting guys at the next level, that guys feel like they can come here and be successful, compete at the highest level, engaging our fans and our community. It's here, John. People, when you're winning, boy, they really get behind you. But, they come up with a lot of different reasons why there hasn't been consistent success. I guess I would say that I've been at some programs where maybe that's been the case, and we've been able to find a way to turn it into that. And that's our challenge. I think for me, this is my third job at a place I'd been an assistant before. And I think coming back someplace where you had been an assistant, you really sort of have a vision for the program, what it takes to be successful here at a place like Minnesota, how we recruit, who we need to touch. And I believe we have that here.
Niko, what are your impressions of the roster you've put together?
It's interesting. I really like them as people, John. In fact, I was out this morning in the parking lot, and our chef here comes up to me and says, "Coach, man, I've had an opportunity to really meet your guys. I really love your guys. They're really nice young men. I really love the way they interact. They're so polite and I think just who they are as people, and just in a short period of time, they've really been coachable. They bought in with great energy. Now it's early. Everybody's able to do that in the first week or so. But that really stands out to me about this team. We have so many new guys, right? 11 new guys, whatever it is. And so that's difficult to do, but I think the staff and us done a great job of recruiting the right kinds of people. And I think if we do that, we're going to continue to get better.
Non-conference scheduling was everything at Colorado State. It's not quite as important in Minnesota, but it's still obviously very, very important. I know you're going to play a couple of games in Palm Springs in the Acrisure MTE, which is a very, very solid field. You also have a return game with Missouri as part of an old home and home series. Is there anything else of significance on Minnesota's non-conference schedule for next season?
We're really working hard to try to find another, neutral game that we can play against a great opponent. We really need to do that. It's difficult this late in the game with dates and everything, but we're really trying to find one more neutral game against a really, really good opponent. That's going to be great for us. And so we still got a little bit of work to do in the non-conference schedule, but, hopefully moving forward for us, we're going to be able to find that right mix of having challenging games. Your MTEs obviously are critical, maybe starting a series with a real quality opponent, and some of those one-off neutrals have got to be great for us.
Niko, final thing. I know you're putting together a brand new roster. I know it's a brand new job. I know it's the Big Ten. I know there's 18 teams, but what are the biggest things that you want to accomplish in your first year as head coach of the Gophers? I
think really starting to set kind of the identity of who we are and how we want to play and how we want to do things. And that's with, the style of play to the kinds of people we recruit, how we connect with our fan base and our stakeholders, just how we go about our business every day. And I know it sounds really, really simple, but I think establishing those things right out of the gate, I think is really, really important. You only get one chance here in your first year to kind of set the tone that way. And so I think that's what we want to do. And because I believe if we do that, I think the guys will continue to get better. We'll find a way to get some results. And I think if we do that, we're going to have a really, really good foundation here for what we need to do in the future. And so, I'm not up here to talk about how many games we need to win or that, because who knows? I don't know what that's going to look like, but I also don't want to set limits either,
Right.
Every year, right? There's teams that surprise and are better than people think. And people who, I don't know how you guys do your preseason top 25s. I know you have to. I know that's part of what the fans want, but that just seems impossible to me in today's landscape. So we can't really worry about what anyone else is doing. We just got to focus on what we're doing and try to start the foundation of building this in the same way that we've done it at all these other places.
That's Niko Medved, multiple NCAA tournaments at Colorado State, obviously trying to do the same at Minnesota. Niko, we appreciate a couple minutes, know how busy you are, and as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
Hey, John, thanks for having me.
You got it. That's Minnesota head coach Niko Medved. We'll return after this.
Get ready.
Wait a second. I thought we were going tubing.
All 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies and Knuckles are now streaming on Paramount+.
And everyone loves it.
Every adventure.
Just try to keep up.
Every face-off.
This ends now.
And every moment that will have you saying,
Where have you been? My entire life!
It's showtime!
All 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies and the entire Sonic universe are now streaming on Paramount+.
All right, I'd like to thank Minnesota head coach Niko Medved for joining us here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. John Rothstein here, ready to put a bow on this one. Let's end it with 3 good nuggets. Nugget number 1, it just means more. According to a source, Florida and Kentucky two of the top brands in the SEC, will meet twice next year during SEC play. So this is obviously great for the SEC. It's great for college basketball. Defending national champion Florida Gators and Kentucky will play twice during SEC play in the regular season coming up in 25-26. Nugget number 2, Big 12 by the numbers. No team in the Big 12 will return 50% or more of its scoring from last season. The teams that return the most scoring in the Big 12 next year, Iowa State, Houston, who are both over 49%, BYU, who's at 47.2%, Arizona, who's just over 38%, and Texas Tech, who's just over 36%. To nobody's surprise, the teams with the most returning scoring in the Big 12 are the teams that are projected to be the top 5 teams in the Big 12. A couple of things to note when I did this exercise. You have Kansas with 16% of its returning scoring. Baylor, West Virginia, and UCF have 0% of its scoring back. And then Arizona State, just 1.7% of its scoring back from last season. And then nugget number 3, American Gangster, Will Wade, the newly minted head coach of NC State, who will join us here on this show in the next couple of weeks, said this over the weekend regarding Van Allen Lubin, who transferred from North Carolina to NC State in the last month. The other school was too dumb to play him, Wade said. When Lubin plays 28-plus minutes, he's done that in 23 games. He averages 15 points and 8 rebounds. I don't know why the hell they didn't play him, but we're going to play him. So he's going to average 15 and 8. We're very excited about then. That is Will Wade. That is what Will Wade aims to do. He does not mind ruffling feathers. He does not mind starting to get things going in the triangle. And he does not mind if people don't like him. We'll see if he can back things up at NC State the way he's backed things up at Chattanooga, at VCU, at LSU, and at McNeese. But here's the bottom line about Will Wade. Will Wade is the only head coach at VCU to win an NCAA tournament game since Shaka Smart took the Texas job in 2015. Will Wade led LSU to an SEC title, and Will Wade last March led McNeese to an NCAA tournament win over Clemson, the only NCAA tournament win in the history of McNeese. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens with the ACC with Will Wade now infiltrated into the triangle. And here's an interesting thing that I looked at today, just doing some ACC research. NC State next season does not have to go to Duke or North Carolina. NC State's double play next year is not either team in the triangle. So what I mean by that is the ACC, when it pivoted from 20 to 18 games, is going to have teams play each other twice, only 2 times in conference play, because there's not as many mirror opponents. So if you're NC State right now, these are the games you're going to have at home in Raleigh. Duke, North Carolina, and they don't go to Durham or Chapel Hill. The double play opponents for NC State, Wake Forest, and Virginia. That is something that is an advantageous situation for the Wolfpack entering next season. It's only June. I'm not going to pick NC State to win the ACC, but I will say this. Darian Williams, the transfer from Texas Tech, will firmly be in the mix to be the preseason ACC Player of the Year. You look at some of the other players that were a part of college basketball last year that are returning to the ACC. And it's not just returning to the same team who produced as much as Darian Williams. Maybe Ryan Conwell and Isaac McNeely, who transferred to Louisville from Xavier and Virginia, respectively. Maybe Marcus Burton at Notre Dame, but he did it on a losing team. Maybe you could say Seth Trimble, who I think is going to have a big year for North Carolina. But I think you can make a case right now that Darian Williams will be in position, and you could make a case to be the ACC preseason Player of the Year next year. The transfer from Texas Tech was a major part of the Red Raiders getting all the way to the Elite Eight. Made the big basket late against Arkansas. And again, he has evolved so much going from Nevada to Texas Tech and now NC State. He's going to be a dynamite point forward for Will Wade, somebody who NC State can run things through. And I think you can make a legitimate case that Darian Williams could be the preseason player of the year in the ACC next season. Will Wade not making any friends in the triangle, but that's better for what we do. It's better for business. Would like to thank Minnesota head coach Niko Medved for joining us here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. I will be back later this week. I'm John Rothstein reminding you, this is only June.